Sit down and stay quiet. My husband, Nathan, leaned toward me and whispered the words, with a smile still fixed on his face. You're embarrassing yourself. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. Around us, expensive glasses clinked softly beneath golden chandeliers. The ballroom buzzed with conversations between business owners, investors, and local politicians. Everyone looked polished, important. At least according to Nathan. I stared down at my plate, not because I was ashamed, because I was trying very hard not to cry. The worst part wasn't it was how familiar it felt. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 41 years old, and for the last 12 years I've worked as a social worker, helping foster children find permanent homes. It's not glamorous. There are no award ceremonies, no fancy offices. Most days involve paperwork, court hearings, emergency calls, and children carrying more pain than any child should. I loved my work. Nathan tolerated it. At least that's what I used to tell myself. The charity banquet that night was being held at an upscale hotel in Chicago. Nathan had insisted we attend. The right people will be there, he said. Those words should have warned me. The right people. As if everyone else didn't count. The evening started the way most of our public appearances did. Nathan introduced me repeatedly. This is my wife, Emily. Then came the rest. She works with kids. Not directs programs. Not advocates for foster families. Not oversees placements across 3 counties. Just works with kids. A hobby, a footnote, a detail. I smiled through it because that had become my role. Smile, stay pleasant. Don't make things uncomfortable. Then someone at our table asked about foster care shortages in Illinois. Finally, something I actually understood. I began answering. We've seen a significant increase in. Nathan laughed. Trust me, you don't want to get her started. Several people chuckled politely. I felt myself shrink, again. A few minutes later, I tried speaking once more. That's when Nathan leaned closer. Sit down and stay quiet. Then he smiled at the table. As I was saying, the conversation continued, but something unexpected happened. A woman seated across from us stopped listening to Nathan. Instead, she stared at me, really stared. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. For several seconds, she scrolled. Then she froze. Oh my goodness. The table went silent. She turned her phone toward me. Is this you? My stomach dropped, because I recognized the photograph instantly. It had been taken 8 months earlier. I was sitting on the floor of a temporary shelter, surrounded by children. After a devastating apartment fire displaced dozens of families. I looked exhausted, hair messy, eyes tired, sweat stains visible on my shirt. Not exactly a glamorous photo. Yes, I said quietly. That's me. The woman smiled. I knew it. Nathan looked confused. The woman introduced herself. Her name was Margaret Lewis. Everyone at the table knew who she was. Founder of one of the largest family foundations in the Midwest. A woman whose donations funded programs across multiple states. She looked directly at me. Your story was included in a report we reviewed last year. The room became noticeably quieter. Margaret continued. There was a section about emergency family placement after the Jefferson Apartments fire. I remembered immediately. 117 displaced children, chaos, fear, long nights, no sleep. Margaret smiled warmly. Every report mentioned one person. My face grew warm. It wasn't just me, she laughed softly. That's exactly what the report said. A few people smiled. Nathan's expression changed, only slightly, but I noticed. Margaret continued asking questions. How many children had been relocated? How were emergency placements coordinated? How did volunteers respond? One by one, I answered. Soon the table wasn't listening to Nathan anymore. They were listening to me. Not because I was important, because the stories were. I talked about frightened siblings who refused to be separated. Foster their homes overnight. Teachers who showed up with backpacks and school supplies. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. The room felt different now. Warmer. More human. Then Margaret asked a question that changed everything. Why has your husband never told us any of this? Silence. Complete silence. I felt Nathan stiffen beside me. My heart sank. Because there wasn't a good answer. The truth was simple. Nathan never saw value in my work. Not real value. Not the kind that impressed people. Not the kind that advanced careers. I forced a smile. I suppose it never seemed important. The words tasted bitter. Margaret's expression softened. She understood. I could tell. Then she looked directly at Nathan. That's surprising. Nathan laughed nervously. How so? Margaret folded her hands. Because Emily's work is one of the reasons our foundation expanded support for foster care initiatives this year. The color drained from Nathan's face. Just a little, but enough. For the first time that evening, he had no response. Questions kept coming. People wanted to hear more. For years I had been interrupted, edited, summarized. That night, complete strangers let me finish my sentences. It felt strange and wonderful. Later, during dessert, Margaret asked if I would say a few words to the room. I immediately shook my head. No, she smiled. I thought you'd say that. But she didn't let it go. Eventually, I agreed. Mostly because something inside me had finally grown tired of staying small. When I walked to the podium, my hands were shaking. I looked out across the ballroom. Hundreds of faces, waiting, listening. I took a breath. My name is Emily Carter, the room quieted. Then I talked about the children. Not myself, the children. The frightened 8-year-old who carried his baby sister through smoke. The foster mother who accepted 3 siblings despite already raising 4 children. The teenager who graduated high school while living in temporary placement. People listened. Really listened. Some wiped away tears. Others nodded quietly. When I finished, the applause wasn't loud. It was genuine. And somehow that mattered more. Then Margaret stepped forward. She smiled warmly. I'd like everyone to know that our foundation will be partnering directly with Emily Carter and her organization moving forward. The room erupted. Applause. Cheers. Recognition. Not because I had won something, because the truth had finally been seen. I glanced toward Nathan. His smile was gone. For years, he had controlled the narrative. That night, he couldn't. On the drive home, neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. You made me look bad. I stared out the window. Streetlights blurred past. Then I quietly answered, No, Nathan. He looked over. I met his eyes. You did that yourself. The silence that followed lasted the rest of the drive. And for the first time in years, it didn't make me uncomfortable. It felt peaceful, because something had changed. Not the room, not the banquet, not even Nathan. Me. I finally understood something I should have known all along. The people who fail to recognize your worth don't get to decide your value. And once you stop asking for their permission to be seen, everything changes. My husband leaned closer and lowered his voice. You don't belong among these people. The words were soft, almost gentle, that somehow made them hurt even more. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. I turned toward Daniel. He smiled as he adjusted his tie, completely relaxed, as if he had just commented on the weather. Around us, the ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers. Waiters moved between tables carrying silver trays. Expensive conversations floated through the air. Investors, executives, foundation directors. People Daniel admired, people he spent years trying to impress. I looked down at my water glass. My reflection stared back at me, small, uncertain, embarrassed. The worst part wasn't the insult. It was realizing he truly believed it. My name is Lauren Mitchell. I'm 43 years old. For almost 15 years, I've worked in community health outreach programs across Ohio. My job isn't glamorous. Most days involve visiting rural clinics, helping elderly patients find medical care, arranging transportation, and solving problems that never seemed to fit neatly into office reports. I love what I do. Daniel never understood it. At least, that's what I used to think. The gala was being held at a luxury hotel in Columbus. Daniel's company sponsored part of the event. For weeks, he had talked about it. The connections, the opportunities, the important people. Looking back, I should have paid more attention to those words. Important people. As if worth could be measured by job titles. The evening started normally, or at least normally for us. Daniel introduced me several times. This is my wife, Lauren. Then came the second part. She does community work. Community work, not healthcare programs, not regional outreach initiatives, not patient advocacy, just community work. Something vague, something small, something easy to overlook. I smiled and let it pass, like I always did. Then someone at our table mentioned healthcare shortages in rural counties. Finally, something I knew. I started answering. We've seen a significant increase in. Daniel interrupted immediately. Trust me's. Lauren, everybody in Ohio. A few people laughed. I forced a smile. The conversation moved on. 20 minutes later, another guest asked about transportation barriers for seniors. I began speaking again. That's when Daniel leaned closer. His smile never moved. You don't belong among these people. Then he took over the conversation. Like I wasn't sitting there. Like I hadn't spent years doing the work. My chest tightened. I stared at my plate. And that's when everything changed. A man sitting near the end of the table suddenly looked at me. Really looked at me. Not politely. Not casually. His expression shifted. He pulled out his phone. For several seconds, he scrolled through something. Then his eyes widened. Oh, wow. The entire table fell quiet. He turned the screen toward me. Excuse me, he said carefully. Is this you? The photograph hit me like a wave. I recognized it immediately. It had been taken 10 months earlier. I was standing outside a mobile clinic after severe flooding devastated several small towns. Mud covered my boots, rain soaked my jacket. I looked exhausted, because I was. I nodded slowly, yes. The man smiled. I thought so. Daniel frowned. The man introduced himself. His name was Richard Bennett. Everyone at the table knew exactly who he was. A major donor. A healthcare philanthropist. The kind of person organizations hoped would notice their work. Richard looked at me. We reviewed a flood response report last year. I felt my stomach tighten, he continued. Every section mentioned the same person. I already knew where this was going, and I hated being the center of attention. It wasn't just me. Richard laughed softly. That's exactly what the report said. Several guests smiled. Daniel's expression became noticeably tighter. Richard kept asking questions. How many clinics were established? How many patients received treatment? How were medications distributed? How were volunteers coordinated? One question became two. Two became 10. Soon, the entire table was listening. Not because of me, because of the stories. I told them about an elderly woman who hadn't been able to refill her heart medication for days. A volunteer nurse who worked 16-hour shifts. A local farmer who used his tractor to deliver medical supplies through flooded roads. The room grew quieter, warmer, more human. Then Richard asked something I wasn't prepared for. Why have we never heard about any of this before? Silence. Complete silence. I felt Daniel shift beside me. My throat tightened. Because there just wasn't a simple answer. The truth was painful. Daniel always treated my work like background noise. Nice, respectable, but never important, I swallowed. I suppose there were more interesting things to talk about. The words tasted bitter. Richard's face softened. Across the table, an older woman slowly shook her head. I don't think that's true. Nobody argued. Nobody disagreed, because everyone suddenly understood what was happening. Richard folded his hands. Lauren, our foundation actually expanded several rural healthcare grants because of recommendations tied to your programs as statins. The room became still. Daniel looked stunned. For the first time all evening, he had absolutely nothing to say. Questions continued. People wanted details. They wanted stories. They wanted to understand the work. And for the first time in years, nobody interrupted me. Nobody summarized me. Nobody spoke for me. Later in the evening, Richard asked if I would address the room. My first instinct was to refuse. I hated public attention, but something inside me had shifted. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was clarity. Maybe I was simply tired of shrinking. A few minutes later, I found myself standing behind a microphone. Hundreds of faces looked back at me. I took a breath. My name is Lauren Mitchell. The room quieted instantly. Then I talked about people, not accomplishments. People. I talked about seniors choosing between groceries and prescriptions. Families driving 3 hours for basic health care. Volunteers sacrificing weekends to help strangers. A retired doctor who came out of retirement because one town had no physician left. The room listened. Really listened. Some nodded. Some wiped away tears. When I finished, applause filled the ballroom. Not loud, not dramatic. Genuine. The kind that matters. Then Richard stepped forward. He smiled warmly. I'd like everyone here to know that our foundation will be partnering directly with Lauren Mitchell's healthcare network on future rural outreach initiatives. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the applause returned. Strongers this time. Several people stood. I glanced toward Daniel. His face had gone completely still. The expression wasn't anger. It was something deeper, realization. Because for years he had controlled the narrative. Tonight, the truth had stepped into the room. And everybody saw it. The drive home was quiet. Street lights passed outside the window. Neither of us spoke for almost 20 minutes. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. You made me look foolish. I turned toward him. For years I would have apologized, softened the moment, protected his feelings. Not this time. No, I said calmly. He looked at me. I held his gaze. You just weren't expecting people to see me. The silence that followed felt different, not uncomfortable, not painful, peaceful, because something important had finally become clear. The people who underestimate you do not get to define you. And sometimes the moment that changes your life isn't when powerful people recognize your worth. It's when you finally recognize it yourself. Sometimes the people who should value us the most are the ones who fail to see our worth. But their blindness does not define who we are. Respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you protect. And the moment you stop shrinking yourself to make someone else feel bigger, your life can change in ways you never imagined. If this story touched your heart, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. I read as many comments as I can, and I truly enjoy hearing your thoughts. And if you enjoy emotional stories about betrayal, revenge, justice, and personal triumph, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thank you for spending your time with me today. Take care of yourself. Stay strong, and I'll see you in the next story.